Good evening, friends, and welcome to this episode of Fund Manager Fridays with 5paisa.com. I'm Deepika Asthana, your host for the evening. So, after hitting a high in October, stock markets in India seem to have taken a breather. I think in the last few weeks, we have seen more red than we have probably seen in the last 1 year. तो ऐसे टाइम पे सब सोचते हैं कि अब क्या करें. So what actually happens in the market is going up. Any stock that you touch and anybody who touches any stock turns to gold, but when markets are going down, that's when you realize कि भाई ये तो गोल्ड था ही नहीं, ये तो बिल्कुल पीतल था. So बहुत जरूरी हो जाता है ऐसे टाइम पे सोचना कि एक्चुअली व्हाट शुड बी आवर पोर्टफोलियो मैनेजमेंट अप्रोच, और हम लोग लॉन्ग टर्म के लिए कैसे अपना पोर्टफोलियो वॉलेटिलिटी proof बना सकते हैं. So, joining us today to discuss different investment options and also touch upon the increasingly important subject of quant modeling and quant investing, we have Mr. Atanuu Agarrwal. Atanuu is the co-founder of Upside AI, a fintech startup that aims to revolutionize the investment space with the help of machine learning. Hi, Atanuu, and welcome to the webinar. Atanuu?
Thank you, Deepika. Very nice to be here.
Lovely. Yeah. I can't say it's probably the best day after the way the markets have
Hello?
performed today, but can you hear me, Atanu? Hello?
Yeah, Deepika, I
Am I
swear
audible?
you're breaking a lot. I can't make out what you're saying.
Just give me a second. Apologies, everyone. Just give me a second. Uh, second. Hello, is this better?
Yeah, it's better now, I think.
Okay, perfect. My apologies.
No
ठीक है,
problem.
so I think we'll just then get to it. Let me not waste everyone's time as well. So, Danu, there is a lot of chatter around investing in mutual funds and ETFs to better deal with market ups and downs. So,
Yeah.
it would be great if you could just share your thoughts on how investors can actually deal with market volatility and the role that MFs and ETFs can play in portfolio construction.
Right. So, real estate में बोलते हैं ना बहुत बार it's location. I think in when it comes to wealth management, it's all about asset allocation, right? It's asset allocation. And I think it's really important that when you look at your portfolio, right, it doesn't matter whether your portfolio is 10,000 rupees or 10 crores, right? Ultimately, what you need to think about is that is a portfolio constructed in a way where you have different risk return profiles represented across your portfolio, and I'll explain that in more layman terms. An FD gives you a 6% return, almost risk free, right? Or 5% return, or nowadays even lower, right? So it does, the reason it gives you only 5% is because it's risk free. You should not compare an FD return to a ETF or a mutual fund return, because they are completely different assets and they both deserve to be in your portfolio, right? So you should be, whenever you think about your portfolio, you should understand that you need all of these different assets in your portfolio. And the great thing about mutual funds and ETFs is that nowadays, given the number of different kinds of instruments that are out there, you can use mutual funds and ETFs and have different flavors of assets within the portfolio, right?
Okay.
So
Mhm.
the way I would sort of think about it is that you need, within the equity space, for example,
Mhm.
equity itself has different risk return profiles, right? There is
Sure.
large
Mhm.
cap equity, mid cap equity, small cap equity, right?
Mhm.
As when it comes to the large cap space, which is the top 100 companies by market cap, I
Mhm.
would, instead of trying to pick a mutual fund, where a mutual fund has a manager who's trying to see which companies will do well and which won't, I
Yeah.
personally think that in the large cap space, it is best to pick a ETF, like a passive
Okay.
ETF that mimics an index. So, of course, the Nifty 50 ETF is most popular. So, you should definitely have some in the Nifty 50 ETF. And you should pick another ETF, which is like the next 50, right? Which is
Okay.
basically gives you
Mhm.
equal allocation towards a Nifty 50 and the next 50 companies by market cap. Because if
Okay.
you,
Mhm.
one mistake people make is they invest in Nifty 100, right? So I
Mhm.
in that is that you will find is a very similar to Nifty 50, because usme the market cap weighting is as per
Mhm.
the top companies have a lot more weightage. So that's not truly, you're not truly getting the full flavor of the top 100 companies, right? So
Okay.
in the large cap
Mhm.
space, that's what I would do. In the mid and
ठीक है.
small cap space, you can. I think there is still scope for picking a bunch of mutual funds. I think there is some alpha in active management, and I
Mhm.
think there are, of course, you have to do your research and make
Mhm.
sure that you look at the track record of the manager, you look at the fees you're paying. But
Mhm.
you can pick a handful of mutual funds, maybe three or four, which gives
Mhm.
you sufficient diversification in the mid and small cap space. And so
Mhm.
that's an equity allocation, right?
ठीक
Now,
है.
beyond equity, that should be, I mean, depending on your age, it can be anywhere from, if you're, in your late, let's say 50s, 60s, it should be about 25-30% of a portfolio, to if you're in your early 20s, it should be 75% of a portfolio, right? So depending on your age, that's your equity
Mhm.
allocation. On the
ठीक है.
debt side, I think the other assets that you should have in your portfolio are debt,
Mhm.
gold,
Mhm.
right? Very important. Both these are different assets which provide different types of diversification. Real estate
Mhm.
to some extent,
Mhm.
right? And now
Okay.
you also have the option of having some crypto, right? And
All right.
if you want, we can go into each of them in detail. But yeah,
Mhm.
that's how I think about it.
So I think so many questions really in my mind, but एक तो है कि can we talk a little bit about ETFs? I'm not sure how uh, well acquainted our viewers are about ETFs. Like ये ETF है क्या? Like what exactly is
Sure.
an ETF and how it could add value? So let's talk a little bit about that. And दूसरा, I am very interested in what you mentioned about uh, inclusion of gold as well as real estate, because I think both can be up, like gold में भी gold ETF है, so is that a better way of investing in gold? अब real estate में क्या होता है at a retail level? Should we invest in REITs, right? Or should we invest in, let's say, a thematic fund which has exposure to real estate and infrastructure? So just a little bit more, let if we can drill down into this.
Sure. So let's address what an ETF is, right? ETF is the full form is exchange traded fund, right?
Mhm.
The way to
ठीक है.
understand it is that it's
Mhm.
basically like a mutual fund, but it is listed, right? So it
हम्म,
trades every day. So in a mutual fund, आप जैसे आप जब आप म्यूचुअल फंड में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, आप क्या
जी.
करते हैं? आप एक एलोकेशन करते हैं, दिन में बोलते हैं अपने बैंक को कि मुझे इस म्यूचुअल फंड में इन्वेस्ट करना है, आप इतना पैसा डाल दीजिए,
हम्म,
राइट? तो वो
correct.
म्यूचुअल फंड का एक जो एनएवी बोलते हैं, नेट एसेट वैल्यू, जो उसकी
हम्म,
म्यूचुअल फंड की प्राइस है, उस प्राइस पे आपको यूनिट्स मिलते हैं म्यूचुअल फंड के, करेक्ट?
correct.
तो एंड दीज यूनिट्स यू कैन ट्रैक डेली, डेली वो अपना प्राइस पब्लिश करते हैं, एंड ऑफ द डे में आप वो ट्रैक कर
correct.
सकते हैं।
Correct.
एक्सचेंज ट्रेडेड फंड का डिफरेंस ये है कि एक्सचेंज ट्रेडेड फंड एक म्यूचुअल फंड है जो स्टॉक मार्केट पे हर सेकंड पे ट्रेड कर रहा है। तो
Okay.
इंस्टेड ऑफ गेटिंग वन प्राइस इन अ डे व्हिच यू गेट एट द
हम्म,
एंड ऑफ द डे,
end of the.
एक्सचेंज ट्रेडेड फंड में यू विल गेट प्राइस टिक बाय टिक। जैसे अभी रिलायंस का स्टॉक अगर आप देख रहे हैं एक्सचेंज पे,
हाँ
वो
जी.
लिस्ट किया है, वो प्राइस मूव कर रहा है, वैसे ही एक्सचेंज ट्रेडेड फंड का भी प्राइस वैसे ही मूव करेगा। तो
Okay.
आप इंस्टेड ऑफ हैविंग अ फंड वेयर आप उसको आप दिन एक ही आपको एक ही प्राइस मिल रहा है, आप दिन के एंड में उसमें इन्वेस्ट कर सकते हैं। एक्सचेंज ट्रेड फंड में आप ट्रेडिंग स्ट्रेटेजी भी बना सकते हैं। जैसे कुछ
Okay.
कुछ लोगों को
हम्म,
अगर
हम्म,
अगर वो एक स्टॉक की तरह ट्रेड कर रहा है, तो आप उस पर कुछ
हम्म,
ट्रेडिंग स्ट्रेटेजीज लगा सकते हैं, या आप उस पे आप मार्जिन ले सकते हैं। तो यू कैन ट्रीट इट लाइक अ
okay.
नॉर्मल स्टॉक, राइट? सो दैट इज द
Interesting.
मेन डिफरेंस
हम्म,
बिटवीन
हम्म,
ईटीएफ्स एंड म्यूचुअल फंड। दैट इज व्हाट एन ईटीएफ इज। और
perfect. Okay.
अब क्या है कि इंडिया में ईटीएफ जो है वो मेनली पैसिव ईटीएफ्स हैं। अब मैं समझाता हूँ कि उसका मतलब क्या होता
जी,
है।
जरूर.
पैसिव मतलब आप एक इंडेक्स, जैसे निफ्टी 50 इंडेक्स है। निफ्टी
हम्म,
50 इज अ टॉप 50 कंपनीज इन इंडिया बाय मार्केट कैप, राइट? It's
हम्म,
simply what the nifty
right.
50 is. So
Correct.
there are ETFs in India which only mimic that, कि
हम्म,
अगर मुझे ये 50 कंपनी में इन्वेस्ट करना है साथ में, तो
हम्म,
एक ईटीएफ आपको ये बस ये 50 कंपनी उसी रेशियो में देगा। तो इसमें कोई मैनेजर डिसाइड नहीं कर रहा है कि रिलायंस का वेट और होना चाहिए या इन्फोसिस का वेट कम होना चाहिए। ये प्री डिसाइडेड जो निफ्टी का इंडेक्स का वेट है, उसी वेट
वेट
में
कर.
ईटीएफ बाय करेगा, और उसी चीज को वो मिमिक करता रहेगा, राइट? दैट
Perfect.
इज अ
Okay.
पैसिव ईटीएफ। एनी
Perfect.
ईटीएफ दैट इज ट्राइंग टू मिमिक एन इंडेक्स, any
हम्म,
benchmark index, is a passive ETF, which is what is
हम्म,
mainly available in India at the moment.
correct.
यूएस में बिकॉज वो मार्केट थोड़ा और मेच्योर है, उधर
हम्म,
आजकल एक्टिव ईटीएफ्स भी आ गए हैं, जिसका मतलब है कि जैसे म्यूचुअल फंड्स में एक फंड मैनेजर होता है जो डिसाइड करता है कि ये कंपनीज अच्छी हैं, तो
कहाँ
मैं
इन्वेस्ट
इनमें
करें?
इनमें इन्वेस्ट करता हूँ। वैसे
हम्म,
ईटीएफ स्पेस में भी अब एक्टिव ईटीएफ्स आ गए हैं, जहाँ पे एक फंड मैनेजर डिसाइड कर रहा है कि मुझे इन कंपनीज में इन्वेस्ट करना है, और
हम्म,
वो ईटीएफ अब लिस्टेड है। तो
हम्म,
तो दैट इज the two types of ETFs, but as
I
far as
see.
Indian investors are concerned, अभी mainly passive ETFs ही available
Okay.
है.
Perfect, perfect. So I think there is some question around risk also about Nifty bees, but generally also can we assume कि फिर passive ETF में risk will be a little less than maybe just going out and buying the market, as opposed to let's say buying a Nifty index futures, buying a Nifty index ETF, 50 ETF, and then holding it on. So आपका benefit may be similar in nature होएगा over a longer period of time, but the risk might be less. I'm not sure, but I would love to know that.
So, see, in futures, the advantage is that you can आप मार्जिन के साथ ट्रेड कर सकते हैं. तो आप जब भी कोई भी चीज में लेवरेज इंट्रोड्यूस करते हैं, लेवरेज का क्या मतलब है कि आप अगर आप 100 रुपए की चीज खरीद रहे हैं, उसमें आप सिर्फ 20 रुपए डाल रहे हैं, तो आपको उस 80 रुपए का एडिशनल बेनिफिट या लॉस हो सकता है. अगर आपका जो अंडरलाइंग एसेट है अगर वो बढ़ रहा है तो आपको ज्यादा, अगर 10% से बढ़ रहा है तो आपको उसका ज्यादा बेनिफिट मिलेगा, क्योंकि आपने आपकी 100 रुपए की चीज 10% से बढ़ गई पर आपने उसमें से 20 रुपए लगाए हैं, तो उस 20 रुपए का पे प्रॉफिट ज्यादा है, राइट. सिमिलरली लॉस में भी वही होगा. अगर वो 100 रुपए की चीज 90 रुपए हो गई और आपने उसमें से 20 रुपए लगाए हैं, तो आपका 50% कैपिटल चले गया, राइट. ऑल्दो एसेट सिर्फ 10% नीचे गया, राइट. तो फ्यूचर्स में जनरली अगर आप मार्जिन के साथ ट्रेड कर रहे हैं तो आपका रिस्क ज्यादा होगा,
ज़्यादा ही है.
जो भी अंडरलाइंग एसेट है.
हम्म, हम्म,
निफ्टी 50 आप ईटीएफ बाय कर रहे हैं, अगर आप
हम्म,
फुल 100% कैश डिलीवरी ले रहे हैं
हाँ जी,
ईटीएफ की, तो उसमें रिस्क जितना निफ्टी का रिस्क है उतना आपका रिस्क है,
बस उतना रिस्क है.
राइट. सो मार्केट्स इन इक्विटी मार्केट्स में इनहेरेंटली थोड़ा रिस्क होता है, जो
करेक्ट.
ऑल ऑफ अस आर फेमिलियर विद. वी सॉ व्हाट हैपेंड व्हेन कोविड हिट. तो उतना ही रिस्क आप ले रहे हैं अगर आप
जी.
ईटीएफ बाय कर रहे हैं.
Perfect, perfect. Superb. I think that clarifies a lot of things for us. Maybe then a little bit about the investment in gold जो आपने mention करा था and the real estate exposure.
Sure. So, gold may, there are many options to invest in gold. There is, of course, you can buy
Mhm,
physical gold, which is the most
mhm,
traditional option, but
mhm,
you can buy gold ETFs. जैसे अभी हमने ETFs की बात की, वैसे ही
correct.
there are ETFs that what they do is कि instead कि आप physical gold जाके buy करेंगे, आप ETF का unit buy कर सकते हैं on the
Mhm,
exchange, और ये
mhm,
आपके लिए gold store करेंगे. तो अगर आपने एक ETF का unit buy किया, उसके
mhm,
अगेंस्ट ये ETF जिन्होंने मैन्युफैक्चर किया है, जो भी कंपनी ने, वो
जी.
गोल्ड फिजिकली स्टोर करेंगे, राइट. सो दैट इज अ
Okay.
गोल्ड ईटीएफ. सो इट्स
Mhm,
जस्ट बेसिकली कि आपको इंस्टेड ऑफ द गोल्ड बार आप घर लाके रख रहे हैं, आपके पास यूनिट्स हैं जो आपके अकाउंट में है. तो इट्स अ सेफर वे टू इन्वेस्ट in ETF. It's more
correct.
efficient rather than going
Mhm,
and buying and having to worry about storing it and buying a locker. This is just a digital way of buying it. इसी तरीके
correct.
से डिजिटल गोल्ड भी है, which is
Right.
some people offer digital gold as well, which is a
Mhm,
kind of variation of ETF in a way, except
yes.
that it's not traded
Okay.
on the exchanges.
Sure.
But in
Okay.
my view, the best
Mhm,
way to invest in gold
mhm.
is sovereign gold bonds, right? Sovereign
Okay.
gold bonds
Interesting.
are bonds issued by the RBI,
Mhm,
right? Which are where the underlying is the gold, right? So आप जैसे अगर आपको 1 ग्राम का गोल्ड बाय करना है, तो आप
mhm.
वो बॉन्ड वैसे ही प्राइस होता है, उस बॉन्ड का 1 यूनिट 1 ग्राम का गोल्ड होता है, तो उसी
Okay.
हिसाब से वो प्राइस करते हैं. एंड
Mhm,
यू कैन, the beauty of the bond is that there are two reasons why I am saying the sovereign gold bond is the best way
sure.
to invest in
Mhm,
gold. One is on top of the return in gold, जो भी रिटर्न गोल्ड का होगा, प्राइस बढ़ेगा कम होगा जो भी
mhm.
होगा, उसके ऊपर आपको आरबीआई गवर्नमेंट 2.5% एनुअल इंटरेस्ट देती है. तो पहली बार आपने
Okay.
अगर 100 रुपए का 100 रुपए का गोल्ड खरीदा, आपको उस
Mhm.
पे 2.5 रुपए आप एनुअली आपको गवर्नमेंट दे रही है उसके ऊपर,
मिलेंगे.
रिटर्न के ऊपर, राइट. तो एक तो वो एडवांटेज है. दूसरा
ठीक है.
एडवांटेज है कि अगर आप इस बॉन्ड को मेच्योरिटी तक होल्ड करें, एंड आई थिंक उसकी मेच्योरिटी, आई थिंक इट्स 8 years. इफ यू
Okay.
होल्ड इट फॉर 8 years,
Mhm.
देन आपका कैपिटल गेन्स टैक्स एग्जेम्प्ट है. सो विच इज अ
Okay.
ह्यूज एडवांटेज कि अगर आप
Indeed.
जनरली गोल्ड का प्राइस, अगर आप गोल्ड फिजिकली होल्ड करते हैं या ईटीएफ बाय करते हैं, उस पर अगर उसको आप अज्यूम कीजिए कि आप 10 साल के लिए होल्ड करते हैं, फिर भी
Mhm.
आपको उस पर 20% टैक्स भरना पड़ेगा विद इंडेक्सेशन. तो 20% से
Right.
थोड़ा कम, बट आपको
थोड़ा
भरना
कम.
पड़ेगा टैक्स.
Mhm.
इस केस में आपको वो टैक्स नहीं भरना पड़ेगा. तो
Yes.
वो भी एक बहुत बड़ा एडवांटेज है. एंड ऑफ कोर्स
Mhm.
अंडरलाइंग इज कि दिस इज बीइंग बैक्ड बाय द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया, सो इट इज अ कंप्लीटली सेफ इंस्ट्रूमेंट.
Yes.
So in
Mhm.
my view,
Mhm.
the best way to invest in gold is sovereign gold
Mhm.
bonds. ये आरबीआई
Okay.
रेगुलरली इशू करती है. आप इसको गूगल करेंगे तो आरबीआई की वेबसाइट पे आपको मिलेगा. और
ठीक है.
इसको यू कैन इन्वेस्ट इन इट थ्रू ऑल द वेरियस प्लेटफॉर्म्स, योर बैंक्स, जीरोधा, आप
Mhm.
इनसे इन्वेस्ट कर सकते हैं. दैट्स द बेस्ट वे टू इन्वेस्ट इन गोल्ड इन माय व्यू.
Perfect. Perfect.
राइट. एंड
Mhm.
सॉरी, Go ahead, Deepika.
No, no, that's perfect. I mean, that is a very interesting thing that you introduced to the conversation because I'm not sure how many of us were aware that through gold, sovereign gold bonds, one can get, of course, the returns, gold generated returns, but also the 2.5% and the capital gains exemption that you just mentioned if you have held till maturity. So definitely something to think about when we think about our overall long-term asset allocation. So that's
Correct.
interesting. And but you are also, I think, moving on to real estate.
Yeah, so real
Hmm.
estate, traditionally, of course, people, when they think of real estate, they go about think about buying an apartment or an
Right.
office or something like that. In my view, again, the best way to invest in real estate are REITs, right, which you
Right.
alluded to.
Hmm. Hmm.
India is a fairly nascent market. अभी
Hmm.
REITs बस चालू हैं,
जी.
but there are three REITs listed in India right now.
Hmm.
I think you can consider investing in all three, diversifying and investing in all three. And I think you will find that if you compare it to any physical real estate you buy,
हाँ
आपको उस
जी.
पे रेजिडेंशियल रियल एस्टेट पे जनरली एटलीस्ट इन द मार्केट आई एम इन मुंबई
Hmm.
आपको टू
Hmm.
एंड हाफ 3% यील्ड मिलेगा, उससे ज्यादा मिलेगा
जी.
नहीं. और आपको
Absolutely.
कमर्शियल रियल एस्टेट पे भी, चलो आप अज्यूम करो आप यू आर वेरी गुड एट इट, आपको 6-7% यील्ड मिलेगा, उससे ज्यादा नहीं मिलेगा.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
आप उससे आप अगर रीट्स कंपेयर करते हैं
Hmm.
तो रीट्स की yield is much better. And what is the reason for that? The reason for
Hmm.
that is कि REITs are essentially professional managers who are able to
Hmm.
purchase or build commercial real estate at scale. वो millions of
Hmm.
square feet बनाते हैं और उनके
Correct.
customers corporate customers होते हैं, so they are able to negotiate really good rates.
Better rates.
तो जो भी बेस्ट प्रॉपर्टीज है कंट्री में, जो भी बेस्ट रेट्स हैं, दे आर अवेयर, दे डू दिस इन 100% of the time, right? So in my view, if I was to invest in real estate, or if I was to advise anyone to invest in real estate, I would do it through REITs. I think it is I think emotionally थोड़ा less comforting होता है, क्योंकि when you own a property आपको लगता है ये
Correct.
प्रॉपर्टी मेरी है, तो
बिल्कुल,
इमोशनल
बिल्कुल.
कंफर्ट कम है उसमें, आई एग्री. बट logically, from a investment perspective,
Investment.
I think REITs are the best way to go about it. Real estate companies के stocks, I personally, you could think about them like real estate investments, but they are not really, because आप ultimately एक कंपनी में इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं, राइट, उसकी इक्विटी
Right.
शेयर्स बाय कर रहे हैं. नाउ श्योर उस कंपनी के फॉर्च्यून्स आर टाइड टू द रियल एस्टेट मार्केट इन अ वे, बट यू आर स्टिल, इट्स नॉट डायरेक्ट रियल एस्टेट एक्सपोजर. आप उस कंपनी को
Right.
क्या वो प्रॉफिट बना रहा है प्रॉपर्टी पे, उस पे उससे आपको
Hmm.
पैसा बन रहा है, राइट. सो इट्स नॉट, इट्स अ प्रॉक्सी, इट्स लाइक अ सब्स्टिट्यूट. बट नाउ दैट have REITs available, I would advise that REITs are probably the best way to
Is
invest in real
a
estate.
better way to invest. That's great, Atanuu. I think a lot of food for thought in terms of what you mentioned around real estate investments. And like you said, कि अगर real estate में आप in India, we invest like from an emotional and security point of view as well, which is a very different point of view. But अगर आप investment के लिए कर रहे हैं, then maybe REITs is the way to go. And
Correct.
similarly, as you said, for sovereign gold bonds, if you want to take exposure to gold and you want to benefit from gold as an investment asset class, then sovereign gold bonds would be a good path to take. So perfect, that's great. So Athanu, I think this is very interesting, but I think there is also so much talk about quant modeling and on even our fund manager Fridays. Actually, in the past also we've done a few sessions on quant modeling and quant investing, and there seems to be a great deal of appetite because I think India may अब तो इतना नया नहीं है, but maybe just a few years back, it was a pretty new thing, and retail investors did not even have access to this sort of investment strategies or approach, right? So it would be great, and you have a quant fund, you leverage machine learning and AI for your fund. So would
Yeah.
just love to understand, if you could walk our viewers through the basics of quant modeling, especially from the perspective of how they at a retail level can probably leverage some of this.
Right. So quant modeling is essentially, I'll oversimplify it and I'll say that it's essentially investing based on purely objective criteria, and with objective criteria are numbers, right? So
Right.
it's investments based on purely numbers. That's what quant modeling means. Mota
Okay.
mota, right? At a very high
Mhm.
level. If I was to dig in a little deeper, I think quant modeling, I mean, I could be wrong about this, but generally its origin is from this what the pharma French five factor
हाँ,
model, I think that's what
five
it's
factor
called.
model.
I think that's where it comes from. उसका मतलब क्या है कि उसमें उन्होंने 4-5 पैरामीटर्स क्रिएट किए हैं आप
Correct.
एक बेसिस जो वो बोलते हैं कि ये पैरामीटर्स के बेसिस पे आप इन्वेस्टमेंट्स को क्वांटिफाई कर सकते हैं कि इसका रिस्क रिटर्न प्रोफाइल कैसा है और
Correct.
उस इफ यू वंस यू प्ले अराउंड ये 4-5 पैरामीटर्स से आप प्ले अराउंड कर सकते हैं तो आपके पोर्टफोलियो का sort of expected return आप उसको चेंज कर सकते हैं I mean I'm trying to simplify it as much as I can. Of course it's much more complex than that, but that's the origin of quant investing, right? And then of course it's abhi US में तो it's been decades, it's been evolving for decades, so now it's become very very sophisticated. I think the top 5 hedge funds in the world are all quant funds, right? Right. The most successful investor of all time is a quant fund, Renaissance Technologies. I don't know, a lot of your viewers would have heard of it, but Renaissance Technologies has delivered its flagship fund, which is called the Medallion Fund, has delivered 66% gross returns for the last since the 80s, 90s, somewhere around that. Right? It's a very secretive fund. And in general, I think with quant, this is an issue. And I'm sure, Deepika, with your background, you know this, that quant is any hedge fund that is using quant, कोई भी fund जो quant use करता है वो बहुत secretive होता है. आपको
Indeed.
actually नहीं पता है कि ये जो बड़े-बड़े hedge funds हैं वो क्या कर रहे हैं exactly.
Black box is the word we used to use.
Exactly, it's a black box, right? एक
Yeah.
तो 2 लेवल के black box है. एक तो आपको जो humans ने डिजाइन किया वो भी बताएंगे नहीं और humans भी एक black box पे rely कर रहे हैं. Black box बोल लीजिए, grey box बोल लीजिए, जो भी बोल लीजिए. But it's a black box. So ultimately, in my view, for a retail investor to understand कि एक quant model में beyond simplistic models, there are Excel models. अगर आप factor investing करेंगे, आप एक Excel में factors डाल के कर सकते हैं, but sophisticated quant investing जो है वो बहुत मुश्किल है for most people to understand, and also because they are black boxes, right? It is difficult sometimes for even the fund manager to trace back कि ये क्यों हुआ, ये मशीन ने ये क्यों पिक किया, ये जो डिजाइन कर रहा है उसके लिए भी मुश्किल हो सकता है कभी कभी टू फिगर आउट कि ये मशीन ये ऐसे क्यों बोल रही है या ये करने को क्यों बोल रही है, राइट? सो आई थिंक क्वांट इन्वेस्टिंग अनफॉर्चुनेटली ऐसी चीज है जो एक लेमैन और रिटेल इन्वेस्टर को उसको ट्रूली अंडरस्टैंड करना बहुत मुश्किल है और उसको यूज करना आई वुड बी वेरी केयरफुल if as a retail investor, if I'm advising a retail investor to use any quant models, because they are by their nature not, first of all, the most sophisticated models आपको access ही नहीं मिलेगा उसका, because most people are very secretive about it, and the models that are available, they are probably, I don't know whether they're robustly back tested or tested, right? Because क्या हो सकता है कि quant modeling for example back test पे बहुत rely करती है कि आपने एक स्ट्रैटेजी डिजाइन की, आपने बोला कि ये 4-5 चीजें होंगी तो मैं ये बाय करूंगा या मैं सेल करूंगा, स्ट्रैटेजी मोटा मोटा वही होती है, राइट? तो अगर if I am, as a person who's designing strategy, if I am not a scrupulous person or I'm not doing it in the right manner, मैं उसमें बहुत सारे एरर्स कर सकता हूँ अगर मुझे नहीं पता है उसको कैसे डिजाइन करना है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल आप एक ओवर फिटिंग करके चीज होती है जहाँ पे आप एक पैटर्न देख रहे हैं जहाँ वो पैटर्न नहीं एग्जिस्ट करता, या वो पैटर्न एग्जिस्ट करता है पर वो एक स्पूरियस कोरिलेशन है, मतलब उस चीज वो दो चीजें साथ में हो रही हैं पर कोई लिंक नहीं है, राइट? वो कोई रीजन से नहीं हो रही है, वो एक कोइंसिडेंस के कारण हो रही है. तो अगर आप इस तरह की स्ट्रैटेजी पे रिलाई करेंगे जो कोइंसिडेंस पे रिलाई करती है वो फ्यूचर में नहीं काम करेगी, राइट? सो ऐसी बहुत सारी कॉन्सेप्ट्स और चीजें हैं जो वेयर अ पर्सन डिजाइनिंग अ क्वांट स्ट्रैटेजी हैज टू बी केयरफुल अबाउट, राइट? एंड दैट इज व्हाई even if as an investor अगर आप किसी को पैसा दे रहे हैं जो क्वांट स्ट्रैटेजी यूज करते हैं, आपको ये सब चीजें चेक करना बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, where you have to first of all make sure कि जो इन्होंने अगर वो आपको एक स्ट्रैटेजी प्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं, you have to ask him कि आपने कैसे डिजाइन की, अगर आपने डिजाइन की इसका ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या था, आपने आपके ऑब्जेक्टिव में लिखा है कि इस स्ट्रैटेजी की स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन हाफ होनी चाहिए मार्केट की, तो लाइव में क्या होगा, लाइव में हाफ थी क्या एक्चुअली या नहीं हाफ, तो आपको that's the only way you can test it, because truly आप black box को कि वो strategy exactly क्या है वो आपको कभी नहीं बताएगा,
पता नहीं चलेगा, correct,
right? So I mean, I'm sorry, I know I've said a lot, but basically my end message is that quant is not everyone's cup of tea, and it is not something that there'll be more and more of it in 10 years from now, but it is not something that in my view retail investors should um, dabble in. And I think it's something that can be dangerous from a portfolio point of view, especially if you start using leverage and options and derivatives. It can have bad outcomes.
That's very refreshingly honest, Tanu, considering that you run a quant fund. So, oh, I think we all really appreciate this level of candor from you. And you're right. I mean, बहुत बार ऐसे होता है that there are certain things in the market like quant investing these days कि बहुत लोग कर रहे हैं, it attracts the retail investors as well, but there are risk factors to it. सबसे पहली बात तो ये है कि आप you need to understand the risk factors, and like some of the things that you pointed out, ki you check the standard deviation, you understand at whatever level best you can understand कि क्या strategy. अब mutual fund में तो fact sheet में आपको पूरा पता ही चल जाता है कि क्या strategy है, but maybe in a
Correct.
quant fund that is not always possible. So from that perspective, I think my takeaway for myself is that ki be careful. Always, the buyer is always beware, right? Caveat emptor. You need to be beware.
Absolutely.
But also, having said that, I think, and maybe you can talk a little bit about your offering as well. There
Sure.
are opportunities to generate alpha. तो अगर आपको लग रहा है कि आपका risk appetite है, and if you're able to do that kind of due diligence, then it is an option for a small allocation to your portfolio you can consider. Can we say that?
Yes, so I think it's definitely, and that's our pitch, right? That people should diversify away from human managers, right? That is the
Okay.
pitch that we make to clients.
Mhm.
And the reason why I said retail investors के लिए it might not be accessible is because today a shop like us, we are a
Mhm.
PMS, we can only accept checks above a certain amount, above
Correct.
50 lakh rupees, right? Today,
Mhm.
maybe in the
Mhm.
future as regulation evolves, we'll be able to even offer it to retail investors, but जनरली क्वांट में वही होता है कि ये अवेलेबल बिकॉज ऑफ रेगुलेशन इट इज ओनली अवेलेबल टू हाई नेटवर्थ
Certain.
इंडिविजुअल्स या आपको बहुत ज्यादा
Mhm.
पैसा डालना पड़ता है टू बी एबल टू हैव
Mhm.
एक्सेस टू स्ट्रेटजी दैट इज
Right.
द
Right.
रीजन व्हाई आई सेड व्हाट आई सेड बट
Mhm.
हैविंग सेड दैट let's assume कि you do have the capital and let's say you can invest in a quant fund. I think quant is definitely something that if possible should be part of your portfolio for
Mhm.
multiple reasons, right? One is
Sure.
the biggest reason is
Mhm.
that if you look at human fund managers in general, and this is across the
Mhm.
world, it's not about India.
Mhm.
If you
Mhm.
look at the US, if you look at anywhere in the world,
Mhm.
generally mutual fund managers or human managers struggle to beat the index. They struggle to beat
Correct.
market returns, right?
Mhm.
And the reason is there are many reasons for it. I mean, एक बहुत अच्छी book है called Thinking Fast and Slow. If you know,
Daniel
it's
Kahneman. Mhm.
it's a must read. It's a
Mhm.
very really nice book for even generally life के लिए, not
Agreed.
specifically finance, but
Mhm.
आप उसको पढ़ेंगे तो आपको समझ में आएगा कि ह्यूमंस एक इनहेरेंट हमें इतने सारे बायसेस होते हैं,
Biases.
हमारी
Mhm.
टेंडेंसीज होती हैं विच स्पेशली इन पब्लिक मार्केट इन्वेस्टिंग इज बिकॉज ये टिक बाय टिक आपको रोज प्राइस दिखती है,
Mhm.
all these
True.
biases and fears and all of these start playing into our investing and sort of hurt our
Investment.
portfolio returns, right? So
Right.
just for the reason of diversifying away from that, because machine के कोई emotions नहीं होते हैं, the machine
Mhm.
एक brutal decision ले सकता है, एक brutally
Mhm.
like sort of just based on objective parameters decision ले सकता है. तो अगर
Sure.
आपको कोई वो
Mhm.
ऑफर कर रहा है जो एक मशीन decision ले रही, तो it's worth, if of course if you find the fund manager trustworthy and of course
Mhm.
if they've delivered returns, then it is something that you should consider because US में ये definitely हो चुका है. As I told you, the
Mhm.
top 5 hedge funds are all quant funds.
Quant funds, right? Mhm.
50% plus trading is now passive trading, right? Where
Mhm.
it is either quant based or some rules based thing where some objective
Correct.
criteria पे लोग trade
Mhm.
कर रहे हैं, not based on fundamental parameters. But
Mhm.
but having said that, just as in life, there are good quant managers and there are bad quant managers, just like there are
Absolutely.
good fundamentals based human fund managers and bad human fund managers, right? So
Absolutely right.
दोनों दोनों साइड का मिलेगा आपको. एक ब्रिज वाटर भी है जो
Mhm.
10 साल से अंडर परफॉर्म कर रहा है,
Mhm.
एक बहुत बड़ा 10 साल से अंडर परफॉर्म कर रहा है, और एक वॉरेन बफेट भी है जो दुनिया के प्रॉब्ली सबसे बड़े वेल
Sure.
नोन फंडामेंटल इन्वेस्टर है जो 10 साल से अंडर परफॉर्म कर रहे हैं. अब ये एक ब्लिप है कि ये परमानेंट है, ये तो टाइम विल टेल.
Time will
बट
tell, right?
but quant at a asset allocation level, again it is
Mhm.
important to have, if you can have some
Mhm.
allocation towards quant funds,
Mhm.
which allows you to diversify away from all these human biases that which that book covers, or
Mhm.
like there are so many of them. I don't want to
So
get
many
into
ways.
each one of them.
Sure.
It'll be too much
Mhm.
detail, but
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's important to have quant as an asset allocation.
Superb, superb. I think so. That's great. I think, one of our viewers is very keen on getting your views on Nifty beast. And he's asking कि इसमें निवेश कर सकते हैं क्या please बताइए. So let's maybe move on to views, your views on the market sectors,
Hmm.
and if you can also help our viewer with his, approach to Nifty beast, it would be great.
Sure. So I think markets. My personal view is, and I think we were talking before this, Deepika, you and I, that in general, timing the markets, in my view, is extremely difficult, or if not
Absolutely.
impossible.
Absolutely.
I think, especially, and for retail investors, like tossing a coin.
Right.
अगर मैं आपको बोलूँगा कल मार्केट ऊपर जाएगा या नीचे जाएगा, आप might as well make that decision by tossing a coin, because that's how much
Correct.
predictive
Yes.
value anything a professional says will have, right? So
Sure.
I think the way to think about it is that whether it's Nifty Bs or any other index, it's the
Mm-hmm.
way to think about it is that you should, as I said at the start, there should be a
Mm-hmm.
certain amount of your portfolio allocated towards equity, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
The determining factor for that is your risk profile, your age, your income level, your
Mm-hmm.
aspirations, many different things that determines how much money you should have in equity, and
Right.
that money should remain invested in equity as long as possible, right?
Sure. Okay.
Now, and of course, the age-old mantra of
Mhm.
SIPs or dollar cost averaging or rupee cost
Mm.
averaging, which is you
Mhm.
regularly make investments at different market levels, right?
Mhm.
That always is a time-tested, beautiful thing
Absolutely.
that
Sure.
Benjamin Graham recommended in the early 40s, and it's as valid today also.
Nearly
That is the
100
best
years.
way for a retail investor to remain invested in the market for a long
Mhm.
period of time and be able to take advantages of different market levels, right? That
Levels,
is,
right.
I think, in my view, the best way to think about टाइमिंग द मार्केट्स एंड आप अगर आप
Mhm.
ट्रेडिंग एज ए नॉन प्रोफेशनल इन्वेस्टर, राइट, अगर
Mhm.
आपका बैकग्राउंड नहीं है इन्वेस्टिंग में, आपको ट्रेडिंग करना है, which is fine. I mean,
Mhm.
you can either as a learning exercise or whatever, or entertainment
Mhm.
purposes you want to trade, you should have a small portion of your wealth allocated towards trading, right?
Correct.
Which
Yeah.
you are, जैसे आप कसीनो जाते हैं तो आप छोटा सा रखते हैं, राइट, एक पूल ऑफ
Mm.
मनी which you are willing to lose.
जाएगा तो चलेगा.
हाँ, तो वैसे ही आपको एक छोटा सा आपका एसेट एलोकेशन रखना चाहिए जो आप
Mhm.
ट्रेडिंग में यूज कर रहे हैं, कि इवन
Mhm.
इफ यू सफर लार्ज लॉसेस ऑन इट, इट इज नॉट गोइंग टू अफेक्ट योर लाइफ, राइट? बट
Right. Mhm.
majority of your wealth should be invested in long term assets, which where you follow a disciplined approach, right, where you're not
Mhm.
worried about market levels too much. अगर आज मार्केट
Sure.
3% गिरा है तो actually should not worry me if I have
Mhm.
if I planned my asset allocation well.
Perfect. I think that is good advice, and honestly, I agree with you 100%. I personally, and I think I've said this in many of my webinars, that I think an SIP is one of the best inventions of the financial markets. It
Correct.
is literally the best way to do long term investing, and like you said, हर market level का आप advantage ले सकते हैं without taking the commensurate risk और tension कि अब market ऊपर जाएगा कि नीचे जाएगा. So yes, SIP, sip your way through wealth kind of a thing, and long term hold करना चाहिए. So I just maybe quickly do a sum up, because I think there's some very nice takeaways in our conversation today. You started off with the importance of asset allocation, and very kindly discussed multiple assets and how we can allocate across equity, debt, gold, and real estate. We also touched upon what ETFs are, and how, if you're looking to gain exposure to large cap stocks or index, maybe ETF is a better approach. So that was great. And then we moved on to quant modeling, and thank you again for shining light on the fact कि भाई risk है, आप ध्यान से निवेश करिए. Do your due diligence, see that you have the ability and the risk profile to invest in quant funds. But having said that, if you do, then definitely do consider a small allocation to these kind of quant funds. And then, of course, in terms of market movements and how we should position ourselves, so the way to go is long term through SIPs. It will help you reduce the impact of market volatility on your portfolio. So that's, like I said, lots of key takeaways. Thank you for that. आप if you have anything that you want to close with, please do go ahead and share with our viewers.
I'm good. I'm good. I think I've spoken a lot. Hopefully, some useful things.
I definitely useful for me, and I think for our viewers as well. There are lots of very good, and I think Atanu. Just on a lighter note, it's always nice to get advice, which is very easily like hum Monday ko jaake we can kind of start thinking about it and implementing it. Sometimes advice
Absolutely
is so esoteric ki you don't even know what to do with it. But
correct.
the kind of like I know I'm definitely googling sovereign gold bonds after this webinar. So
Good.
I think our viewers should also have similar takeaways. So thank you very much for joining us,
My pleasure.
and thank you viewers for tuning in. We will see you next week. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.